Around 2006, I was driving a flatbed, picked up a load of construction material, drywall, roofing, don't remember, but it was prepackaged in boxes, and I remember having to strap protectors on the load in rural Tennessee. Memory is foggy now, but I want to say it was between Memphis and Nashville. A tarp was required, so I strapped everything down, tarped the load, and left the shipper. About 5 miles down the road, in the middle of nowhere woods on a 2-lane road, I noticed my tarp flapping in the wind. I then found a wide shoulder and pulled over to fix it. I realized that I just flat out did a crappy job tarping this load and decided to redo it on the side of the road. Undo all the bungee straps, drag the tarps off, roll them back up, climb up on the load and start unrolling the tarps again. And then I see a guy walking down the same side of the road I'm on, coming towards my truck. I don't think anything about it other than to keep an eye on him because I'm in the middle of nowhere and continue what I'm doing. About the time I have the tarp set in place and I'm climbing down to start hooking the bungee straps back on, this guy is getting close enough that I'm now paying more attention to him than I am to tarping my load. I grab my winch bar and set it on the trailer where I'm working just in case. The guy gets to me and the first thing I notice is his hair. It's like a mullet, but it's beyond patchy. Like he tried to cut his own hair and had a seizure in the process and said F it, good enough to party. The next thing I noticed were his eyes, which I could only describe as off. Like, they were clear. I don't think he was drunk or high or anything, but also didn't give me the distinct impression that the elevator didn't go all the way up. Clothes were dirty and not well maintained. He also had dirty white tennis shoes, cause I remember he didn't have laces on one shoe and the tongue was noticeably out of place. He stops by me, waits until I acknowledge him and just says, "I've got a long walk." I'm like, "Yeah man, you do, and we're in the middle of nowhere," making it clear that there's no ride to be had here. He nods and starts walking by me, continuing on his way, but then stops at about the driver door at my truck and turns around, comes back to me and repeats himself, "I've got a long walk." At this point, I explain that I can't give him a ride, insurance and all that. I apologize for not being able to help him out, and he seems to accept this, turns around and leaves. I wait for him to get a little ways away from my truck and start working on finishing the tarp job. I still keep an eye on him as he's moving away from me. As I'm putting on the last of the bungee straps, I look over to check where he's at and he's turned around heading back towards me, now about 100 yards in front of the truck and coming back my way. It looks like he's talking on a cell phone, has his hand up to his face and I could barely make out his mouth moving, his other hand waving like he's having a conversation with someone. I finish with the straps, grab my winch bar, and I'm climbing into my truck as he's about 10 yards away now. As soon as I'm in the cab, I lock the doors and set the winch bar on the passenger seat just in case. I look at the guy and realize he's not talking on a phone, he's talking to his hand. And now I'm nervous, cause he doesn't look like he's having a nice pleasant chat. It looks like more of an angry conversation. I crank the truck up and put it in gear and just pull out, didn't look for traffic or anything. As I pass him, he's just looking at me, still holding his hand to his face with his dead ass look on his face just staring at me. Gave me the creeps. About the time I hit 5th or 6th gear, I look in the mirror and there's no one there. Not a truck driver, but I've spent the past 4 years driving every day and night for work. I was in a fairly remote part of Mississippi, somewhere between Clarksdale and Greenwood. It's important to note it's all 2-lane highway, the 250-mile drive home. The weather has turned pretty sour as I was leaving Clarksdale. I called my wife and told her there were high wind advisories and very possible tornado threats throughout the Delta, and I'll call her as soon as I made it into a safe area again. I had already been working for 14 hours when I got to the truck, so I had eaten dinner and grabbed some coffee to stay awake and alert. Now, if you've never driven through flat farmland at night for 100 miles, it's very fatiguing and spooky without inclement weather. I had driven maybe 30 miles out into the farmland when hail started bouncing off of my truck. Being a Mississippi native, I knew in July hail meant tornado. I pull off to the side. I'm in the middle of nowhere, no lights to be seen, no cars behind or in front of me, and start looking for the storm or tornado I believe that is approaching. I roll the passenger window down and shine a bright flashlight off into the night. Nothing there. Turn to the driver's side and this guy has his face pushed up against the glass, grinning ear to ear. It was a tall male, very pale white eyes. Eyes were sunk back quite a bit. The grin was what truly got me. It was corner to corner with crooked teeth like the Cheshire Cat. I screamed and he was gone. I slammed the truck in drive and took off. We have cameras that are running all the time on our trucks. I got to the first place to stop and called my wife. I didn't want to scare her, so I didn't mention a guy or the hailstorm. I did, however, pull the SD card and check the cameras. I promise you, this guy never popped up on my front or rear cameras. I've always played it off as my imagination. I will say I don't drive through the Delta in the dark anymore if I don't absolutely have to. Okay, got one while I was actually driving a bus made out of a truck in the desert of Central Australia. I was over 500 kilometers near the nearest town, so yeah, middle of nowhere stuff. So I was out on a 5-day charter to pick up a bunch of Aboriginal elderly women to go and get their women business health checks done. On the day I took them to get that done, we went via a place called Mintabi, so they could shop in the clothing and whatever store that's randomly in this little opal mining area of South Australia. We left from there quite late to make the 3-hour journey back to where we were all staying overnight. The next day, I take them back to their respective desert communities. The passengers all fell asleep as they had a very long day, as had I, but that's my job. Even the nurse who was traveling with us fell asleep. So there's me, all alone in the cab of the Mercedes truck-derived bus, my 30 passengers all sleeping in the darkness of the passenger pod behind the cab, and it was around 9 p.m. Up ahead in the distance, I see a headlight coming towards me along the lonely desert dirt road. So I dip my lights so the spotlights go off and adjust to see only what low beams will show me. I drive down in a slight dip of dry creek bed expecting to see the car with only one headlight anytime shortly. It's nothing unusual to see a car with only one headlight out there, so I'm not even remotely bothered. As I come out of the dip, I put my spotlights and high beams back on and there is no car, no nothing, just empty dirt road. There is no dust in the air and I can see a good distance in front of me and out to each side. There was nothing there, just empty desert, the dirt road and me alone in a cab. I keep the lights all on until we come to a stop about an hour later. I didn't see any cars or anything the rest of the journey. Before I let the passengers out, I ask if any of them saw the light and they all go dead silent. And after a short while, they start talking in their own language before they all in a hurry get off the bus. A few minutes later, a couple of the ladies came up to me and asked to tell them exactly what I saw without leaving anything out and to describe exactly where I saw it. Now, I'm a big guy. I've lived on 3 continents. I've been a police officer, a teacher, a bus and coach driver, truck driver, all sorts of things. Let's just say that I'm pretty skeptical, but I do have an open mind. I'm not scared by much in this world. I got on great with the indigenous people of Central Australia and I trust that I know when something rattles them. I took note of exactly how far we were when it happened, and after I told the ladies everything from start to finish and described in minute detail exactly where it happened, the 2 ladies looked at me with the whites showing in their eyes. They looked spooked, and they said, "Driver, we are so lucky that you did not stop, because if you did, no one would have seen any of us ever again. We'd all be gone." I asked why, and they just shook their heads and said to not talk about it because it had scared all the ladies. I'm sure many people have heard about the Min Min lights in Western Queensland. Well, whatever these ladies knew and whatever I saw in our location, they were convinced that it wasn't something you wanted to meet in the desert at night. I only ever saw this once. I only saw it for maybe a minute and it looked just like a car headlight a couple of kilometers away up the road. But I'll tell you what, if the ladies that come from this area, whose people have survived in this desolate, remote part of the continent for 60,000 years are worried to the point of all being scared, I certainly don't want to mess with whatever it is.